People talk about the fact that black people score 15 points less than white people. What do you think of this kind of numbering?
It's a fact whose meaning is totally unclear and whose existence doesn't in any sense specify the cause. Take the black-white difference in America, which is an average of 15 points, which is one standard deviation. By definition, the test is standardized so that 15 points will be a standard deviation. That's true. I mean, nobody denies that. The issue has never been that. The issue has been why. And the existence just doesn't tell you anything about why. The existence of the 15-point difference is thoroughly consistent with the two utterly extreme interpretations, namely nature and nurture. That is, in principle, it could be so. I don't think it is. That the difference is due to inborn capacities that vary between the races. And the other obvious explanation is that the difference is due to the enormous social disadvantages that the legacy and history of racism continues to impose upon the lives of black people in the United States. Either explanation would equally well account for the difference. So it is a fact whose meaning is totally unspecified by the existence of the fact.
Hello fellas, what's up? I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Now, I just want us to focus on a very sensitive and very important topic that we're going to talk about today, and that's the issue with race and white being viewed as the most and intellectually smarter than black people. I have this video here and I just want us to watch it, see what we can learn from it, and let's gather here later on after the clip and try to learn from each other, try to unlearn what we need to unlearn, try to learn new things, and also relearn other things. I'm your presenter Turay, and if this is your first time in this channel and you've not subscribed, please consider supporting us by simply subscribing. Give us a like, share our content, we greatly appreciate. I thank you so much for those who have subscribed. Now let's rock it.
Why do you think American society is so obsessed with IQ?
I don't know that we're obsessed by it, but I think it arises largely in the context of the lamentable history of our racism. I don't know that it's as much an issue in more homogeneous societies, but we have a situation based on the legacy of racism and continued oppression of people of African descent in this country that has led, for social reasons, to poor average performance of blacks on these tests. That doesn't tell you why it happens, but in a basically racist climate in a country with a strong racist history, I suppose it's not surprising that particularly conservative social thinkers would try to relate poor performance of blacks to intrinsic biological limits.
So are you trying to say that measuring IQ is used here as an instrument for racism?
It has been in the past. I don't think it's much used that way. Now, in fact, I'm not sure that IQ in the old-fashioned sense is much measured by mental testers at all today, except if you read Ernstein and Murray's bell curve, clearly these data still exist. I just didn't think that many people granted that number much meaning anymore. As I like to put it, the quick critique of the bell curve is that it's based upon 4 assumptions, all of which have to be true. If any one of them is false, the whole argument collapses. First, there has to be a meaningful single number that can be given to intelligence. I think that's false. Secondly, you have to be able to rank people in a single linear order upon it, and that order has to then correlate with social attributes, whether you go to prison or not, whether you have children out of wedlock, etc., your income. Thirdly, that number has to be highly heritable. And fourthly, it has to be unchangeable, or effectively unchangeable. A lot of people confuse the third and the fourth. They assume that if something's heritable, it means it's unchangeable, but that's false. Suppose the first 3 were true, and they're not. I mean, suppose there was a legitimate number, and you could rank people, and it was highly hereditary. It still could be very mutable. For example, the obvious example is I may have a an inherited defective vision, which is 100% inherited, and I go to the drugstore and I buy a pair of eyeglasses and my vision is fine. I mean, it could be, all those things could be true about intelligence, but the equivalent of buying the pair of eyeglasses, namely programs of remedial education, might boost IQ, and then the whole argument would collapse.
Then how do you feel about testing children to see what would be the best school for them to go to?
Depends on what you want to use it for. Again, if you look at Binet's original intentions in setting up the IQ test in 1905, 1906, when he did the first ones, you see, Binet was a French psychologist, and he was commissioned by the Commissioner of Education in France to devise a test to find students who needed help. And that's why he did the test. And his motives were entirely benevolent. In fact, he specifically argued against giving a hereditary interpretation because he understood that if you did that, you would misinterpret the number as a limit rather than an aid. He wanted to use the number as an aid to identify children who needed help so that they could be given help. And everything could be done for them. Whereas if you give a hereditary interpretation, then you identify a low score with people who can't be helped. The exact opposite occurs. You invert the original purpose. So as long as Binet's original purposes are honored, the tests can be used benevolently, and sometimes they are. For example, tests are used usefully to help identify people who have specific difficulties like dyslexia or autism or other forms of disability in learning, and there's nothing wrong with that. The human mind just doesn't work very well with certain questions. We're very bad at probability. We're always making these dichotomous divisions of things into two. One of the things we're very bad at is when we're faced with something that's very complex, as intelligence is, because it involves lots of different independent abilities, the relationship between hereditary and environment, and all these complex questions. We have this terrible tendency to try and make things simple, try and get a single number. There's a whole history in subject after subject of trying to encompass complex and independent attributes with a single number. My colleague Medawar, for example, once wrote a very interesting article showing how in soil science, in this totally different field, people for decades got hung up on trying to get a single number to measure the quality of soil. Now, how could you do that? There's no such thing as the quality of soil. This one is 51. This one is 76.2. There isn't. There are just different things that soils can do. The same. Now, the human mind is even more complex. There is no number that can capture the quality of mind, and it's almost humorous to think that there is. But unfortunately, the assumption that we can do such a thing, tied to the use of such theories by conservative social ideologies, has had profoundly negative consequences for the lives of millions of people. There are millions of people, particularly in this country, who've been told they can't do this, who've been denied admission to this or that program on the basis of a number, which was falsely interpreted as representing an intrinsic limit upon them based on their biology, but was in fact only a measure of social influences upon their lives. So unfortunately, it's not funny when it's had such tragic consequences. And that's, of course, why we are upset over the fact that the issue seems to keep coming up, because it has consequences. It hurts people.
Welcome back again. And, this professor reflection raises a profoundly important point about how we interpret related to standardized testing and racial differences. He brings at this clearly. And if you look keenly and well, you'll see that the professor acknowledges a well-documented statistical difference, a 15-point average gap in IQ scores between Black and white Americans, but emphasizes that acknowledging the gap as understanding it. This is a very critical distinction that is too often glossed over in public discourse, because the number by itself does not imply causation. It's statistical observation, not a moral or biological verdict. And as he goes down with these sentiments, he rightly critiques the leap from correlation to causation. So the mere existence of a gap says nothing about what produces that gap. So to treat the number as a self-explanatory is a misuse of statistics, and that's why you see this professor is warning against this intellectual shortcut, which can lead to dangerously simplistic or prejudiced conclusions. So it's a call to resist the temptation. It's a call for every black people to resist the temptation to see numbers as inherently meaningful without understanding the deeply complex systems that produce them. And I also see that this professor lays out two diametrically opposed interpretations of the 15-point difference: a genetic explanation versus a racial or environmental one. So they clearly state that they do not believe the genetic explanation is valid, which aligns with a broad consensus among many psychologists, sociologists, and neuroscientists today. And you all see that by framing both explanations as theoretical, plausible, but explicitly rejecting the hereditarian one, the professor emphasizes intellectual integrity and openness while still expressing a moral and a scientific stance. And this is especially important in contentious areas like intelligence research, where ideology often distorts evidence. And the professor insistence on not jumping to conclusions. And the professor's insistence on not jumping to conclusions demonstrates a commitment to scientific rigor and ethical responsibility. The question that are the white people really intellectually superior to black people is asked rhetorically, and it highlights the danger of misinterpreting statistical data as value judgments. Overall, the professor's sentiments are grounded in both critical thinking and moral clarity. They are pushing back against simplistic or racist interpretations of statistical data while acknowledging the reality of data itself. The key message here is that numbers do not speak for themselves. They must be interpreted, and interpretation must be guided by rigorous science, historical awareness, and ethical responsibility. I don't know what are your views. These are my take, but you can keep me updated. Let me know what you think about this. Let me learn from you as well as you learn from others. Let's interact in the comment section. I've been your presenter to Rain, and if this was your first time in this channel, please consider supporting us by simply subscribing, give us a like, share our content. We greatly appreciate. I hope you have nice time ahead. I'm hoping to see you in the next video as well. Goodbye.